The strangers arrived at dawn carrying a corpse. No warning. No message sent ahead. Just 5 people from a neighboring community walking into the village square with a body wrapped in white cloth, their faces grim and determined. "We need to speak to your elders," their leader announced. "Now." Within minutes a crowd had formed. Women abandoned their morning cooking. Men left their tools in the fields. Children pressed close, trying to see what was wrapped in that cloth. Eze Okonkwo, the village head, emerged from his compound, his wrapper hastily tied around his waist. "What is the meaning of this? Who are you people?" The leader of the strangers was a tall man with grey in his beard. "My name is Mazi Okoro. We come from Umuike village, 2 days' walk from here. 3 weeks ago, a woman collapsed at our village boundary. She died in our care 5 days ago. We buried her according to our customs." "Then why bring her here?" Eze Okonkwo asked, confused. "Because yesterday a trader passed through our village. He spoke of a recent burial here, a young woman who died suddenly, when he described her." Mazi Okoro paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. "We need to see your burial records. We need to know who you buried 3 weeks ago." A murmur rippled through the crowd. 3 weeks ago. Everyone remembered. Amara, the quiet wife of Chidi the farmer, had fallen ill and died within days. The whole village had attended her burial. "Why?" Mamangozi stepped forward, her old eyes sharp. "What does our burial have to do with your dead woman?" Mazi Okoro's expression was troubled. "Because I think you may have buried the same person." The crowd erupted, shouts of disbelief, accusations of witchcraft. Some people backed away, making protective signs with their hands. "Impossible," someone shouted. "We buried our dead properly." "Then explain this," Mazi Okoro said quietly, and nodded to his companions. They began to unwrap the cloth. Eze Okonkwo raised his hand. "Wait. Before we proceed, someone fetch Chidi. He should be here for this." A young boy ran off toward the farms. The village square fell into an uncomfortable silence, everyone staring at the wrapped body, wondering what impossible thing they were about to see. Chidi arrived within minutes, breathing hard from running. He was a lean man in his late 20s, with kind eyes that had not quite recovered from grief. When he saw the strangers and their burden, he slowed, confusion crossing his face. "What is happening?" he asked. "These people claim to have buried a woman who may be related to someone from our village," Eze Okonkwo said carefully. "They want us to see the body." Chidi's brow furrowed. "Related? Who?" No one answered. Mazi Okoro gestured to his companions and they finished unwrapping the cloth. The body lay exposed in the morning sun. For a long moment no one moved. No one breathed. Then Chidi made a sound like a wounded animal and collapsed to his knees. It was Amara, his wife, the woman he had buried 3 weeks ago with his own hands. The crowd exploded into chaos, people screaming, pushing forward to see, pushing back in fear. Some women fainted, men grabbed their children and held them close. "This is witchcraft!" someone yelled. "Call the Dibia! Abomination!" Chidi crawled toward the body, his hands shaking, reaching out but afraid to touch. No, this is not real. This cannot be real." Mamangozi pushed through the crowd and knelt beside the body. She was the eldest woman in the village, the one who had washed Amara's body for the first burial. Her hands were steady as she examined the corpse's face, then its hands. She looked up at Chidi, and her expression made everyone fall silent. "This is Amara," she confirmed, "but something is very wrong." "Of course something is wrong," a man shouted. "The dead do not appear in 2 places." "No," Mamangozi said firmly, "something else. These hands, they are different." She held up one of the corpse's hands for all to see. "When I washed Amara's body 3 weeks ago, her hands were soft. The hands of a woman who cooked and cleaned but did not do hard labor. These hands have fresh calluses, raw patches. These hands have done something difficult recently." The implication hung in the air, too terrible to speak aloud. Mazi Okoro stepped forward. "I think it is time we told you the full story, all of it. Then perhaps together we can understand what happened here. If you're still watching, subscribe to this channel. What comes next will shake you to your core." Eze Okonkwo gestured toward his compound. "Let us move somewhere more private. Mazi Okoro, bring your people. Chidi, Mamangozi and the other elders, come. The rest of you, return to your homes. We will share information when we have it." The crowd dispersed reluctantly, voices carrying speculation and fear. Chidi remained frozen beside the body until two men gently lifted him to his feet and guided him toward Eze Okonkwo's compound. Inside the large meeting hut, they arranged themselves in a circle. The body lay in the center, covered again with cloth, but everyone's eyes kept drifting to it. "Start from the beginning," Eze Okonkwo said to Mazi Okoro. "Leave nothing out." Mazi Okoro settled himself, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of his story. 3 weeks ago, just before dawn, my son Obinna was checking our farmland at the boundary between our territories. We had been having problems with wild pigs destroying crops, so he went early to set traps. He paused, his hands clasped tightly together. He heard a sound, like an animal in distress, groaning. When he investigated, he found a woman lying in the tall grass. Chidi's head jerked up. Alive? Barely. She was conscious, but could not speak clearly. Her clothes were torn and covered in red soil. Her fingernails were broken and bleeding. Her feet were cut and swollen. She looked like she had walked through hell itself. "What did she say?" Mama Ngozi asked quietly. Only one word over and over. Buried. Just that word, in a voice so hoarse it barely sounded human. Buried, buried, buried. We thought she was delirious, confused. Perhaps she had been attacked by bandits, or escaped from somewhere terrible. Mazi Okoro's voice grew softer. "We carried her to our village. Our healer examined her. He said she had no serious wounds, but her body was shutting down, like she had pushed herself far beyond what a person should endure. He gave her water, tried to feed her, but she could barely swallow." "Did she say anything else? Any name? Any place she came from?" Eze Okonkwo pressed. "She tried. On the second day, she managed a few words. She said home and husband and something that sounded like a name, but her voice was too damaged. We could not understand. Our healer said her throat was injured, like she had been screaming for hours until her voice broke." The room had gone completely still. Everyone was staring at Mazi Okoro, and slowly, horribly, the pieces were beginning to form a picture that no one wanted to see. "She lived for 2 days after we found her," Mazi Okoro continued. "She would try to speak, try to tell us something, but the words would not come. She became more and more agitated, like she knew she was running out of time. On the morning of the 3rd day, she simply stopped. Her heart gave out. We buried her with respect, as we would any person who died in our community." "And then?" Eze Okonkwo prompted. "Then yesterday, a traveling trader came through. He mentioned he had passed through your village recently. Mentioned a burial he had witnessed. A young woman, he said, died suddenly from illness. He described her appearance." Mazi Okoro looked directly at Chidi. "He described your wife. The same small scar above the left eyebrow. The same height and build. Everything matched." "Many women could match that description," one of the elders said, but his voice lacked conviction. "That is what I told myself," Mazi Okoro agreed. "But something felt wrong, so I asked more questions. When did she die? How long was she ill? How quickly was she buried? And when the trader told me she was buried the same day she died, within hours." He shook his head. "That is when I knew we needed to come here, to see for ourselves." Chidi's voice was barely a whisper. "You think she was not dead when we buried her?" It was not a question. Mazi Okoro met his eyes with compassion. "I think she woke up underground. I think she somehow escaped. I think she walked for miles trying to find her way home. And I think she died alone, unable to tell anyone who she was or where she belonged." The sound that came from Chidi was not quite human. It came from somewhere deep in his chest, a place where grief and horror lived together. He doubled over, his hands pressed to his face, his body shaking with silent sobs. Mama Ngozi stood abruptly. "We need to open the grave. The first grave. We need to see what is inside." "Is that wise?" an elder asked nervously. "To disturb a burial site." "That is not a burial site," Mama Ngozi snapped. "That is a crime scene. If what we suspect is true, if she was buried alive, then there will be evidence. Scratches on the coffin lid, disturbed soil, signs of struggle. We need to know the truth." Eze Okonkwo stood as well. "Mama Ngozi is right. Gather some men, tools. We will open the grave immediately." Within the hour, a group had assembled at the burial ground on the outskirts of the village. Amara's grave was marked with a simple wooden cross, the soil still fresh and dark from recent digging. Chidi stood to one side, supported by 2 friends, barely able to stand. The men began to dig. It did not take long. The soil came away easily, not yet settled and hardened by rain and time. When they reached the coffin, they paused. "Open it," Eze Okonkwo said quietly. They pried off the wooden lid. The coffin was empty, but the inside told a story more horrible than any of them could have imagined. The white burial cloth lay shredded and twisted at the bottom. On the inside of the coffin lid were scratches, deep scratches, gouges in the wood where fingernails had clawed and scraped and fought, and at the bottom corner of the coffin there was a hole. The old wood had splintered and broken, creating an opening barely wide enough for a desperate person to squeeze through. Soil had spilled into the coffin through that hole, but most of it had been pushed back out. They could see the tunnel she had made, clawing upward through 6 feet of earth. In some places, the tunnel had collapsed and been redug. Again and again, she had fought her way up. One of the men vomited into the grass. Another turned away, his hand over his mouth. Mama Ngozi stared into the coffin with tears streaming down her face. "She woke up," she said. "She woke up and tried to get out, and she succeeded." "But how?" an elder asked, his voice shaking. "How did she have the strength?" Mama Ngozi pointed to the splintered wood. "This coffin was old. Your father used it for your grandmother, did he not, Chidi? And you reused it because you could not afford a new one." Chidi nodded mutely, shame washing over him. The wood was already weak at this corner, perhaps from age, perhaps from previous use. She pushed at it until it broke. Then she clawed her way through the soil, inch by inch, pulling herself up through 6 feet of earth. The image was so horrible that no one spoke for a long moment. The thought of Amara, terrified and alone in the dark, digging through soil that kept collapsing back on her, fighting for every breath, her fingers bleeding, her voice screaming until it broke. Chidi fell to his knees beside the grave. She was alive. She fought her way out. And I never knew. I never came back to check. I just left her. You thought she was dead, Eze Okonkwo said quietly. We all did. But she was not dead. Chidi's voice rose to a shout. She was alive and I buried her, and she had to dig herself out like an animal and then walk for miles trying to find home. And I was not there. I was not there. No, Eze Okonkwo said firmly. You are not responsible for this tragedy, but someone is. We need to understand what happened. How did a healthy young woman appear to die so suddenly? Who declared her dead? Who rushed the burial? All eyes turned to find Dibia Okafor in the crowd. The village healer had been standing at the back, his face pale, his hands trembling. When he realized everyone was looking at him, he seemed to shrink into himself. Come forward, Eze Okonkwo commanded. Dibia Okafor shuffled forward, his eyes on the ground. He was a thin man, barely 40 years old, with nervous energy that made him seem younger. He had inherited his position from his father, but had never quite commanded the same respect. Tell us, Eze Okonkwo said, how did you determine that Amara was dead? I checked her. I did my examination. She had no pulse, no breath. Her skin was cold. All the signs pointed to death. How long did you examine her? Dibia Okafor shifted his weight. The usual time. A few moments. Maybe a minute. A minute? Mama Ngozi's voice was sharp. You declared a woman dead after examining her for 1 minute? She showed no signs of life. What more could I do? You could have waited. Mama Ngozi shot back. You could have watched her through the night. You could have checked multiple times over several hours. That is what a proper healer does when there is any doubt. There was no doubt. Dibia Okafor insisted, but his voice wavered. And besides, the family wanted to bury her quickly. It was hot. They said she would begin to spoil. There was pressure. Pressure? Chidi's voice cut through the argument like a knife. He stood slowly, his eyes fixed on the healer. What pressure? Who pressured you? Dibia Okafor's mouth opened and closed. His eyes darted to someone in the crowd, just for a second before he caught himself. But Chidi had seen it. He turned to follow the healer's gaze. His mother stood at the edge of the crowd, her face frozen in an expression of carefully controlled fear. Like and comment below if you think there's more to this story. The truth is darker than you imagine. Everything clicked into place in Chidi's mind. The sudden illness, his mother's insistence on a quick burial, her strange behavior in the days after Amara's, not grief exactly, but something else. Guilt? Relief? Mama, Chidi said quietly, walking toward her. Tell me about the soup. His mother's eyes widened. What soup? The soup you brought to Amara, the night before she fell ill. You said it was special, for fertility. You insisted she eat it even though she was not hungry. Tell me about that soup. The crowd pressed closer, sensing something important was happening. It was just food, his mother said, but her voice had gone high and tight. Vegetables and palm oil and... What else? Chidi demanded. What else was in it? Nothing. Mama, please. Chidi's voice broke. Amara is dead. Nothing can change that now. But I need to know. Did you put something in that soup? Some herb or root? His mother's mask finally cracked. Her face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. I only wanted to help. Help with what? You had been married 3 years with no children. People were talking, saying perhaps she was barren, saying perhaps you needed a more fertile wife. I went to an herbalist, not our village, a different one, where no one knew me. I asked for something to help her conceive. But that is not what you got, is it? Mama Ngozi said, stepping forward. You asked for something else. Chidi's mother shook her head frantically. No, I swear. Tell the truth, Mama Ngozi commanded. You have already caused one death with your lies. Do not compound it with more. The older woman seemed to collapse inward. Her voice came out small and broken. I asked him for something to make her sick, just for a little while, just sick enough that she would be sent home to her family to recover. I thought if she went home for a few weeks, Chidi would see how much better his life could be without her, how much easier, and maybe she would not come back. The crowd gasped. Chidi staggered backward as if he had been struck. But I did not mean for her to die, his mother wailed. The herbalist said it would only make her sleep deeply for a day, maybe 2. He said she would wake up weak but alive. He said it was harmless. Except it was not harmless, Mama Ngozi said coldly. It made her appear dead. And when Dibia Okafor examined her, he saw a cold, still body and declared her gone. And you, knowing what you had done, said nothing. I thought she was dead, Chidi's mother sobbed. When Dibia Okafor said so, I thought the herbalist had given me the wrong thing. I thought she truly was gone. How could I know she would wake up? You could not know, Eze Okonkwo said heavily, but you should have told the truth immediately. If you had confessed what you gave her, Dibia Okafor would have known to watch for signs of deeper unconsciousness. He would have waited longer before declaring death. And Amara, his voice softened with grief, Amara would still be alive. Chidi turned away from his mother, his hands clenched into fists. You are not my mother anymore. I have no mother. Chidi, please, get away from me. Get away before I do something I will regret. 2 elders gently but firmly took hold of Chidi's mother and led her away from the burial ground. Her wails echoed across the village, but no one offered comfort. Eze Okonkwo turned to Dibia Okafor, who looked like he wanted to sink into the earth. And you, your negligence is equally to blame. You were taught better than this. Your father would be ashamed. I know, the healer whispered. I know. Both of you will face judgment from the Council of Elders. But first, we must properly honor the dead. We have failed Amara twice. We will not fail her a 3rd time. The preparations for the 2nd burial took 3 days. This time there was no rush. This time every detail was considered with care and reverence. Both communities worked together. Chidi's village and Mazi Okoro's village united in their shared grief and determination to make things right. They built a new coffin, stronger and more beautiful than the first. They wove it with protective charms and blessings. Women prepared Amara's body again, washing it with herb-scented water, dressing it in the finest cloth. And they dug a new grave in a place of honor, beneath a large iroko tree at the center of the village square where everyone could see it, where no one would forget. On the day of the burial, both villages gathered, the entire population of 2 communities standing together in silence. Chidi stood at the front, his eyes dry now, all his tears spent. He had not eaten in 3 days. He had not slept. He simply existed in a grey space between life and death, waiting for this final goodbye. Eze Okonkwo spoke first. We gather here to honor Amara, daughter of Onitsha village, wife of Chidi, who died not once but twice because of our failures. We failed her in haste. We failed her in judgment. We failed her in truth. Today we do not ask her forgiveness, because we do not deserve it. We simply promise to remember, to learn, to never make these mistakes again. Mazi Okoro stepped forward next. In our village, we cared for a stranger without knowing she had a home, a husband, people who loved her. We gave her peace in her final moments, but we could not give her the comfort of familiar faces. For that, we carry sorrow. But we promise this: her grave in our village will remain. We will tend it. We will remember her. So she will always have two homes, two communities that claim her as their own. Then Mama Ngozi spoke, her voice cracking with emotion. I washed this woman's body twice. Once when I thought she was at peace. Once when I knew the truth of her suffering. I will carry that knowledge until I die. But I will also carry this. Amara was strong. To survive what she survived, to crawl through earth and walk for miles with a broken voice and broken body, searching for home. That takes a strength most of us will never know. We honor that strength today. Finally, Chidi stepped forward. He had prepared no words, but they came anyway, pulled from the deepest part of his grief. Amara, my wife, my heart. I failed you. I should have waited. I should have questioned. I should have trusted my instincts that something was wrong. Instead, I trusted tradition. I trusted others, and that trust cost you everything. His voice grew stronger, carrying across the silent crowd. I cannot bring you back. I cannot undo what was done. But I can promise this: your story will not be forgotten. Every time someone wants to rush a burial, your name will be spoken. Every time a healer wants to make a quick judgment, your suffering will be remembered. You died twice so that others might live once. That is the most terrible lesson anyone should have to teach. He knelt beside the coffin and placed his hand on the wood. Rest now, my love. Truly rest. No more fighting, no more pain, no more fear. Just peace. Finally peace. They lowered the coffin into the ground slowly, carefully. Every person present threw a handful of soil onto it, each one whispering their own prayer or apology. When the grave was filled, they planted flowers around it, bright yellow flowers that would bloom even in the dry season. A week later, the Council of Elders met to deliver judgment. Chidi's mother stood before them, her head bowed. She had aged 10 years in as many days, her face gaunt, her hands shaking. You administered poison with intent to harm, Eze Okonkwo announced. You kept silent when the truth could have saved a life. You valued your own desires above another person's existence. For these crimes, you are banished from this village. You will leave before sunset and never return. All property and rights you hold here are forfeit. You are no longer recognized as part of this community. She opened her mouth as if to protest, then closed it. There was nothing to say. She simply nodded and turned to leave. Mama, Chidi's voice stopped her. She turned back, hope flickering in her eyes. Take your belongings and go, he said flatly. I never want to see you again. The hope died. She walked away and Chidi watched until she disappeared from sight. He felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just an empty space where his mother used to be. Dibia Okafor faced his own judgment next. You failed in your sacred duty, Eze Okonkwo said. You declared death without proper examination. You allowed pressure and convenience to override caution and care. While your intention was not malicious, your negligence was catastrophic. You are hereby stripped of your title as village healer. You will leave this village and seek training elsewhere. Perhaps in time, with proper education and humility, you may practice healing again. But not here. Not now. Dibia Okafor accepted his fate without argument. He packed his belongings that same day and left, walking the same path Chidi's mother had taken, toward exile and unknown futures. The village slowly returned to normal life, but everything had changed. The way people spoke to each other, the way they made decisions, the way they treated the sick and dying. New rules were established. No one could be declared dead until multiple people examined the body. Examination had to continue for at least a full day and night. If there was any doubt, any hesitation, burial would be delayed. Better to keep a body above ground too long than to bury someone alive. Chidi moved through the days like a ghost. He worked his farm. He ate when people brought him food. He existed, but he did not live. His hut felt too empty, too quiet. At night, he would lie awake and imagine Amara in the darkness, trapped, terrified, calling his name with a voice that would not work. 3 months after the second burial, he made a decision. He sold his farm, he packed his few belongings, and he left the village. Where will you go? Mama Ngozi asked as he prepared to depart. I do not know, Chidi admitted. Somewhere new, somewhere without memories, somewhere I can breathe without feeling her ghost in every corner. She would not want you to suffer like this. Perhaps, but I cannot help it. Every morning I wake up and remember. Every night I go to sleep and dream of her, trapped beneath the earth, and I cannot reach her. I need to start over. Mum Ngozi embraced him tightly. Then, go with our blessings. But remember, running from pain does not make it smaller. It just makes it follow you to new places. I know, Chidi said, but I have to try. He walked out of the village at sunrise, the same direction his mother had gone, but on a different path. Behind him, he could hear the village waking up. The sounds of life continuing as it always did, despite tragedy. At the village boundary, he turned back one last time. He could just see the top of the Iroko tree, where Amara was buried. Yellow flowers bloomed around its base, visible even from this distance. "Goodbye, my love," he whispered. "I will carry you with me, always." Then he turned and walked forward, into whatever future waited beyond the horizon. Years passed. The story of the wife who was buried twice spread to every village within 100 miles. Mothers told it to their daughters, healers told it to their apprentices. It became the cautionary tale everyone knew, the story that made people think twice before rushing any important decision. In Chidi's old village, the grave beneath the Iroko tree became a sacred place. People would visit it when they needed to remember the cost of haste, of lies, of placing convenience above truth. The yellow flowers were carefully tended, blooming year-round through some unexplained miracle. New healers trained longer and more carefully, knowing that a single mistake could cost everything. Families waited patiently when death came calling, giving the soul time to depart fully before consigning the body to earth. And in the evenings, when children gathered around the fire, the elders would tell them. There was once a woman who died twice, not from illness, not from age, but from certainty. From people who were so sure they knew the truth that they stopped looking for it. She woke up in darkness, buried beneath the earth, and had to claw her way back to the light. She walked for miles, unable to speak, unable to tell anyone who she was. And she died far from home, alone, trying to find her way back to the people she loved. The children would lean in closer, eyes wide. "So remember this lesson," the elders would say. "Not every still body is gone. Not every tradition is wiser than listening. Not every confident voice knows the truth. When life and death hang in the balance, patience is not weakness. It is mercy. And truth, even uncomfortable truth, is always kinder than a convenient lie." Subscribe to hear more stories like this. Drop a comment telling us what lesson you learned from Amara's story. And somewhere in a village no one from his homeland would recognize, a man who had once been called Chidi lived a quiet life. He had remarried eventually, a kind woman who asked few questions about his past. He had children now, 2 daughters who looked nothing like Amara, but whom he loved fiercely. But sometimes, in the deep hours of night, he would wake from dreams of earth and darkness. He would slip outside and look up at the stars, remembering a woman who had fought death twice and lost both times. "I remember," he would whisper to the night sky. "I will always remember." And perhaps, somewhere in the realm where spirits dwell, Amara heard him. Perhaps she found peace knowing her death had not been meaningless, that her suffering had taught lessons that saved other lives. Or perhaps she simply rested, finally, truly rested, in the darkness that no longer frightened her because it was chosen, not forced. The yellow flowers bloomed on her grave. The stories kept her name alive. And the village learned to wait, to question, to seek truth, even when it was uncomfortable, because one woman had died twice to teach them. And that lesson, terrible as it was, could never be forgotten.